Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry podcast, where we're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around your money, their careers, and their practices. I am your host, Evon, certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors. Thank you so much for listening once again. And on today's episode, we have another great conversation with two awesome guests, Dr. Miki Lyn Zilnicki and Dr. Jessica Licausi, co-owners of Forks Optometry over in New York. And this was a really fun conversation. They talked to me about their journey cold starting their practice. And what's interesting about their practice is that they have a purely niche practice specializing in vision therapy and rehab from day one. They have no optical and they take very little to no insurance. And I thought this was such a great example of how to successfully specialize from the very beginning, even when competition is all around you. And they talk about how they had such a clear vision of the type of practice they wanted to build, the way they wanted to work with patients, and how that vision guided all the other decisions that they made with the practice. And they talk about wins and losses and lessons learned and some things they tell themselves in the past. And it was just a fun conversation. I think there's something to take away, whether you're just thinking about cold starting or whether you've already opened your doors and thinking about what's next. Check out the show notes for all of their contact information. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and leave a review. If you'd like to learn more about me or Optometry Wealth Advisors, check out my website, optometrywealth.com. And you can schedule a no-commitment intro call to learn more about how I help ODs master their cash flow, proactively plan around taxes, build net worth, and just more purposely plan around their money and their practices. And if you want to reach me directly, or if you have any ideas or questions for future shows, shoot me an email at Evon, EVON, at optometrywealth.com. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Zilnicki and Dr. Licausi. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast. I am your host, Evon Mindrin. Thank you so much for listening. In today's episode, I have two awesome guests. I have Dr. Miki Lyn Zilnicki and Dr. Jessica Licausi, co-owners of Forks Optometry in Riverhead, New York. Thank you so much for joining me.
We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I've been excited to talk with both of you since I heard your interview for the Review of Optometric Businesses podcast and your articles that came around that and after that. And what I loved about that interview was that you were both so intentional about the way you cold started and the way you wanted to practice, even the days you wanted to work. You were so intentional about every step as you cold started your practice and how that informed all of your other decisions. And so I was excited to get a chance to ask you about that, to learn about how you built your cold start practice, where you are now, and some of the lessons you've learned. And I think that whether the listener is thinking about cold starting or have opened their doors already and are wondering what they need to do in their practice, I think there's something they can take away from you. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I'm excited to dig in.
Well, thank you so much for having us on today. We're excited to chat.
Yeah. And let's just start with some background. What got both of you into optometry? Why did you choose optometry as your profession?
That's a great question. I think I knew I always wanted to do something in the medical field. I just wasn't certain which exact route to take it into. So I went into college as a biology major, figuring that kept most of my doors fairly open. And optometry is something I had been exposed to when I was fairly young. My first trip to the optometrist myself occurred when I was 4 years old, mid-kindergarten, where I was kind of struggling in the classroom, and turned out I was a fairly moderate myope. So that first pair of glasses and experience with that optometrist really was life-changing for me. So it's something that always stuck in the back of my head. And just kind of envisioning the life I wanted for myself. I wasn't necessarily thinking about a family life at that point in college, but I was thinking about, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to have balance to my life? I had been kind of considering the surgeon route, but thinking to myself that meant a lot of late nights, being on call, weekend hours. I decided that optometry was the right fit for me, where I think it really gives you the best of both worlds. You get to be a doctor and practice medicine, but have that balance in your life where you can really set the hours that you want and have a family life and have really the best of both worlds.
And for me, I kind of stumbled on optometry kind of by accident. I went to college thinking that I was going to be an accountant because I loved numbers. And I literally took one economics course and I said to my mom, I was like, business isn't for me. She was like, it's your first semester of college. Like, you're just making that decision willy-nilly. And I was like, nah, I'm going to go to science. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't want to do the traditional medical route. So that kind of left me with eyes, teeth, or feet, right? And the other two really didn't speak to me. So eyes it was. And I started my career as a vision therapist for a doctor in Tarrytown. So my world of optometry was very different. And it kind of just sparked, I just loved it. And it sort of just sparked this passion in me. And I just jumped right into the optometry route. It was kind of like on a whim decision. And here I am, 10 years later doing optometry. So
Awesome. Yeah. I really appreciate that background. And both of you went to SUNY School of Optometry in New York, right?
Yes, we did.
Is that where you met?
Well, we crossed paths a little bit there. We were about 2 years apart in school, and we just kind of from there kept crossing each other's paths. We had met briefly in school, but didn't really interact with each other too much. And then we met again at one of our local VAs where I was working as an attending and Dr. Zilnicki was doing one of her student rotations. Then we ended up being at a practice together where we were kind of working together, trying to bring vision therapy into an existing practice. But we weren't really having the experience that we kind of envisioned for how vision therapy practice the way that we wanted it to run. So that's where we kind of then jump into starting this practice together.
So that's an interesting, something I want to dive into because I think there's a lot of optometrists out there wondering should they own, should they not, should they stay an associate, and if they own, should they buy into a practice, should they go into cold starting one of their own? What led both of you to want to cold start your practice and go through all that to getting a business off the ground from the beginning instead of just trying to buy into an existing practice that works the way you want to?
So for Dr. L and I, we, like she had alluded to, when we were in this private practice, we weren't able to practice the way that we wanted to when it came to vision therapy, because vision therapy as a specialty brings challenges in terms of insurance. And there's also challenges when you're working in a primarily primary care facility, right? Because you don't want to be on every insurance panel because they don't reimburse for vision therapy, but then you also need to do the primary care counterpart. So it raises some challenges. And we decided that it was interesting. We both sort of decided that we wanted to leave that practice independently. And literally one day I said, hey, I gave my notice and what are you doing? And Dr. L was like, I don't know. And I was like, hey, are you interested in starting a practice? And that's literally how simple the conversation went. And my residency was at a private practice that really was ahead of the game in the thought process that you can practice optometry independently of insurances and to bring value to your patients in a different way than just seeing the reimbursements from eye care, vision plans and things like that, to really kind of elevate the type of care that you're providing. So we just said to each other, we had this vision of what we wanted our optometry practice to be, and no other place was going to provide that but us. And it really starts with that vision. For the people listening, my recommendation is think about what and how you see your life, and then choose your career path based on that. Being a practice owner isn't for everybody. Being an associate is okay. Working in a corporate optometry realm is okay if that fits your lifestyle. For Jess and I, we really wanted to have complete independence over our schedule, the types of patients we were seeing, and how we were treating our patients. And we decided that the only way to do that was by creating it ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most common reasons someone would want to own in general is having that control and creative freedom over every part of the business, but especially that patient experience and serving patients the way you want to according to your vision. There are financial benefits to owning a business, but those come with time. and patience and a lot of sacrifice. And but the most important, in my opinion, the most important reason that someone should want to own is to have that sort of control and creative freedom to influence and to build that business as you want. Talk to us about what that vision looked like, because it was very specific for both of you. You had a lot of specific ideas, and those influenced a lot of the other decisions. So talk to us about what that vision looked like.
I think our vision really started with knowing that we wanted to bring the specialty of vision therapy to the area that we were practicing in. The closest practice that was providing the service was about 45 minutes away. So it left this huge underserved area of Long Island. We still have patients that travel 45 minutes to an hour further east of our office to come find us. So that's really what sparked how we wanted to set up the office. So with that, insurance was a huge conversation that the two of us had. We knew that we really wanted to build up vision therapy, but still provide primary care optometry as well. We both love a full scope optometry and love to practice disease. I do some low vision. Dr. Zilnicki loves pediatrics. So we decided to really limit ourselves in how many insurances we were taking, only taking the ones that we knew reimbursed vision therapy well, which was a little bit of a gamble. That did mean at the beginning of our practice that primary care aspect maybe was a little bit slower to build up because most of our patients are private pay or out of pocket. But we try to set our fees reasonably. We work with our patients and always provide them with forms to try to get reimbursed through out-of-network benefits. We try to keep that in mind and work with our patients best we can to keep everything reasonable for them. The other big decision we made, which people thought was wild, is that we do not have an optical in our practice. And we were very intentional in that decision for a couple reasons. One is that we have a plethora of opticals around us where we are in Riverhead. We have mom and pop shops, we have corporate opticals, we have your Walmarts, BJ's, Target, Costco. We have lots of fellow optometrists and ophthalmologists who are already providing those services to the area. So for us, it didn't make sense to spend that financial piece, which is a huge overhead expense to build out an optical and a cold start practice, because the service was already being provided in our area. And a lot of people said to us, oh, well, down the road, you'll probably add an optical in, right? And here we are. How many years in now, Dr.
Almost
Z?
7.
Almost 7. And I really don't think that it's in our plan for the future to build out an optical.
And
yes.
I was just to say on that note, for us, we felt like whatever we wanted our office to be top notch. And we felt it when it comes to optical, to do it, you have to do it well, right? To be successful. And both Jess and I really didn't have a passion for optical, and neither of us wanted to spearhead that. And we said, we're going to focus on what we're good at, and what we're good at is specialty care optometry. And that was such a critical piece to the development of our office. And here we, like Dr. L said, we are here 7 years later, and there's no plans for us to add in that optical piece.
Interesting. So you have limited vision plan use very early from the very beginning, and you don't have an optical. And I'm sure there's ODs listening to this shaking their head like, no, that's not possible. And I think it's common advice to cold starts that you should take vision plans and you should have an optical, and it's essentially a marketing cost to get traffic in the door early on. How did you get the business up and running without those two drivers of revenue? What was that like?
Well, the one benefit of being here in Riverhead was that I grew up here. So we called our local news paper and we said, hey, we have a Riverhead grad that's opening this office. And they did a wonderful story that really started to garner some traction. We also went on what we called was our world tour, and we went and visited literally every physician in the area. We went to pediatricians, we went to optometrists, we went to ophthalmologists, we went to occupational therapists, physical therapists, endocrinologists, anybody in the area. And we went and shook hands and gave them an informational packet on what we were doing and what kind of care we were providing. And we just really started to create those relationships. And as soon as patients came into our facility, say they came as a referral, we built our rapport on reports. We would write a report about that patient and send it right back to the referring provider. Every time we saw that patient for a follow-up, that referring provider got another report. And it really built that trust with other providers in the area. And interestingly, within the specialty of vision therapy, we don't get a ton of OD to OD referrals. Our biggest referral sources in the area are actually a group of neurologists and an orthopedic group that deals primarily with concussion patients. So from our standpoint, we just got out into the community. We even did a lot of in-services to provide people with information because they didn't know what vision therapy and rehabilitation was. So we invited them into our office to meet us, to see what we were doing, see our technology, check it out and play with it themselves to really help to understand and garner those relationships.
Yeah, that's the kind of creative marketing you probably weren't taught in optometry school. And what's interesting there is you're showing the value not only to your patients, because you're going through that process with your patients and you're explaining it to them the whole time, but you're also showing value to your the people referring you those patients. So you're almost selling the service to two separate entities at the same time, which is very interesting. You also have a podcast. Can you talk about that? What was the purpose of that? What your goal is for the podcast? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So this was something that Dr. Z had kind of brainstormed about, and she kept talking to me about saying, I really want to start a podcast together. And it was one of those things that was just hard to get off the ground, just both of us being in the practice, seeing patients, doing our administrative duties that we have. So it really kickstarted in the pandemic, which was kind of a blessing for us. And we both had overlapping maternity leaves shortly before the pandemic started. We had our sons about 3 weeks apart. So it was a good way for us to still connect with each other, with us both being a little bit out of the office. And then with having closed our office throughout the pandemic for a period of time, it was a way for us to stay connected with each other, stay connected to the business and our goals for the future, and stay connected to our referral sources and our patient base also. So our big goal with the podcast is just primarily education. We really want to get the message out there that optometry is much more than just being able to see 20/20 and getting your pair of glasses and your contact lenses. There's many other pieces to your visual system that all have to be working in tandem for you to have efficient, comfortable vision. And our podcast listenership really varies from our various referral sources to patients listening. So we really try to just explain things in layman's terms and educate everybody about all the pieces to the vision puzzle and what we can do through vision therapy.
Yeah, I gotta say I have two young kids at home. One is a 8-month-old, I believe, and I love the episodes on like what does a baby see. Like that was so interesting to me. So you got a new subscriber out of that because I thought it was just so fascinating.
I love that.
What was that process like from idea to doors open? And this could be a whole 2-hour episode on its own, but what was that process like from idea to door open to get that cold start up and running? What did that look like?
We didn't have the most typical start. It literally took us 5 months to open, which sounds crazy to say. It was March that we had the conversation of what are you doing? And we said, let's open a practice. And our doors were open in August of that same year. Now, a few factors went into that. One, we worked with Bank of America, a very specific branch of it called Practice Solutions, which typically lends to physicians, right? Because we are less risky than, say, someone that's going to open an ice cream shop, right? And looking for funding. And to be honest, Practice Solutions was the only people that would even entertain the idea of these two young doctors that owned nothing giving us money. They literally were like, do you own anything? And I was like, no, I own nothing. I just got out of school. I have nothing to my name. But Practice Solutions was a wonderful entity that helped us get off the ground. They lent us a large loan and then as well as a line of credit when we first opened our doors. And the other big factor that allowed us to open so quickly was that we found a building that had basically no build out. The only thing that we had to do in the office was build cabinets. So there was no real like big construction.
Wow, okay.
Period. Yeah. So we got really lucky with those two factors. And it really, the biggest challenge for us was figuring out how to set up a business. We were like, okay, we need a lawyer, we need an IT person to deal with all of the tech stuff, and someone to build the cabinets. And then we had our bank, and we would just meet and figure out, and we sort of delegated tasks of who was going to tackle what. And then there we were 5 months later, and the doors were open.
So a lot to pull out of that. And I think the challenge for any professional business owner is exactly what you said, is that you went to school and all of us professionals go to school in some way for that profession. You went to school to provide incredible eye care for patients, and now you're business owners. And you've sort of got to figure all this out, and you've got to get used to that dual identity. You're wearing two hats now. Yes, you're on one hand a practitioner and you're working in the business, but you've also got to figure out what it looks like to build a business and to handle all those administrative duties and everything else that comes with that. One of the most challenging parts of any business ownership venture is partnerships, or partnering with another owner. What was it like to decide from the very beginning, you want to do this together as co-owners? How did you separate out ownership duties and practitioner duties and even pay? Like, what was it like to separate those out from the very beginning?
I have to say, honestly, that was one of the easiest parts when we opened our practice.
Okay.
I think just from knowing each other prior to opening the practice together, Dr. Z and I knew that we were very much on the same page. We had the same values in our life outside of optometry, and we really had the same goals going into opening the practice. And we are very fair with each other. We really split everything 50-50 in terms of duties, in terms of pay. We really, truly treat each other as equals. One thing that I know other practices do with their doctors or their co-owners is that they keep track of vacation days and things. That's something that we have never done with each other. We're very understanding that there's a lot going on in life. My family doesn't live close, so I tend to take more days off than Dr. Zilnicki does because I'm traveling to see my family, whereas her parents are very local. And that's something that we've never really kept track of. If someone needs time off, it's no big deal, and we cover for each other. I think the other really beautiful thing about having a partner was it really helped us in those beginning stages because it enabled us to continue working while we were still opening the practice. And well into about 2 years of the practice being open, we continued being employed outside of the practice to help maintain our own personal financials while we were building up our patient base in the practice ourselves, which I think if we had either one of us had been a sole practitioner, that would have been really difficult to handle financially, personally.
Yeah, interesting. And I recently had a conversation with Dr. Chad Fleming, and he talked a lot about partnerships and what to look out for when evaluating a partner. And a lot of it came back to character and just getting to know the character of your potential partner, whether you are an owner bringing in a partner or an associate joining a partnership. And you both had the advantage already of knowing each other really well, knowing what your values were, knowing you both had a passion and training in vision therapy. So you had a huge advantage there. What was it like to I'm a finance guy, so this is where it gets really fun for me. But what was it like to prepare financially, both as you mentioned on the personal finance side in associating part-time and getting extra income, but also preparing to go and get lending? What was that like to prepare yourself financially for that?
We'll do the business first. So like I had said before, we both, Jess and I, really didn't have much to our name. So going into the process, I was sort of naive in that I was like, they'll give us money, like the bank, they'll give us money. Like, who doesn't lend to people? Like, this is a noble thing. We're trying to open a practice that they'll give us money. And that obviously is not the case. So we went to a bunch of different places. We went to our local banks. We went to larger chains like Chase and things like that. And then we settled with Bank of America, and we got kind of our ducks in a row to show them, that we were, Dr. L had been out for about 2 years, and I literally was only done with my residency about 8 months. And we just showed them that we were working and we had our, our W-2s, and that we both are really great in terms of paying things on time. We had great credit scores, and the Bank of America kind of took a jump on us and said, like, we trust that you're going to do this, and went forward with it. And then personally, It definitely was something that we said to each other, like, we know that we're going to be taking a step back financially. As ODs, typically when you're coming out, you're making between $100,000 and $150,000. We definitely did not make that the first few years that we were in practice. We really were very frugal with how we paid ourselves in the office, because we wanted to make sure that we didn't burn the candle at both ends with the practice, and there's a lot of talk that you have to make sure that you're paying yourselves enough, right, to make sure that you are in a good financial position. And how we did that was we figured out the lowest that we could pay ourselves at the office with our supplemental income from those other offices. And then we slowly made that ratio change, right? Like, as the office was doing better financially, we increased our pay, and then we were dropping off what we were doing outside of the office itself. And then eventually, like Jess said, about 2 years in, we realized that the office was making enough money to get us to that salary point that we needed to no longer need the outside help and to really just go all in the office. But we were very, very frugal in the beginning. But I think the problem that a lot of cold start practices and owners do is that they don't pay themselves at all. And that's a mistake. You need to pay yourself. You have to figure out what you need to pay your life, to fuel your life within reason, so that you don't, there was this thread on ODs on Facebook once with all these owners that were like, I've never paid myself. And I, it's just as like rolls back in. And I was reading it and I was like, this is crazy. Like, you need to supplement, but a lot of people make that mistake. So you really just have to find that balance. And like I said, within reason, I think our weekly salary when we first opened, Jess, I think it was like $200 a week or something, right? It was that little. I think so. But it was what made sense for us to not like drain that huge line of credit that we had. So really within reason, thinking and being very open and honest with your partner about your needs. We've had conversations throughout the years of, I need to make more money to buy a house. I need to make more money to supplement my health insurance for my family. How do we do that together through the office? And those are the conversations in terms of finances and being open and honest. There is no secrets between the two of us.
Yeah, and I think you're both proponents of the Profit First book by Mike Michalowicz. And one of the best takeaways from me, having read that, was that you're not there to serve your business. Your business should be there to serve you, and you should enjoy the profit from that business. I mean, it's your investment. It should be providing for you. Within reason, obviously, there's a balancing act that you have to do, especially early on, where your business needs every dollar of resource it has to just get off the ground. But you definitely should have that mindset of, okay, this business should be profitable. And you're also working as a practitioner in your business. You're working as an employee in your business, and you should demand, you as an employee, a practitioner, and you as a shareholder owner should demand your return on your time and your investment. And that business should be there to serve you. So I love that. And what are, you mentioned some of the things you were frugal about and making some decisions. What were some of the decisions and trade-offs, and I guess we'll call them wins? Like, what were some of those decisions and wins that turned out to be good decisions early on when deciding where to spend money in one place versus another?
I think one of our biggest lessons, where I think initially we made a mistake, but then it turned into a win, was with our staffing. We thought to ourselves, we're opening a practice. We can't just hire one person. We need 2 full-time staff members, right? Because what if someone is sick one day and can't come in? So we hired 2 full-time staff members. And I would say probably about a month in, we realized that one staff member was really taking on a lot of responsibility, worked independently well, didn't really require too much micromanaging from us. Whereas the other one would kind of tend to delegate to her. And we had to really micromanage their time and continually give them tasks to do. And when we were first open, we were not terribly busy with patients, to be honest. And Dr. Zilnicki and I needed some of that time to focus on still the building out aspects of the office and setting up administrative things and, learning how to be a practice owner. I was doing all of the billing myself. Dr. Zilnicki was working on some of the accounting things herself. So we found it was pulling us away from those business owner duties to micromanage this employee. So ultimately, we made the risky decision to go down to one employee. But I would say financially, that was a win because by far payroll expenses are our largest expenses. They have been since day one and continue to be. That's our biggest percentage expense throughout the office in terms of what we spend our money on. So I think that model only works if you really find the right person. You know, we had someone who was very loyal to the office, who was very committed, would come in, really didn't take time off, and really was kind of a master of all trades and was our employee that did everything for us. And then as business gained traction and we gained more of a patient population, then we started to add staff members in. But I would say be frugal with your payroll and your staffing at the beginning. That was one of our biggest lessons.
What were some of the things that we'll call them, I guess, lessons learned instead of losses, but what were some things that you put dollars to that didn't actually work out the way you expected them to?
Oh, we got thwarted by new business. Let's do print ads.
Oh, no.
This was 7 years ago, so like papers were still kind of a thing, but we spent tens of thousands of dollars on print ads. And it was by far the worst way we spent our initial funds because one, I think print ad works if you have an optical because you could put in the print ad, here's a coupon for 10% off for your first pair of glasses if you come in, right? That could get some traction into your doors. For our practice, it didn't work. It didn't make sense because it was just a little ad that said like grand opening, we're a new practice that does vision therapy. People would probably look at that and say like, what's vision therapy? And like turn the page to like the cooking section. Like it just was such a waste of money. I think I can count on one hand how many patients came in from that print ad. So we learned very quickly that advertising, you have to be smart. And in the advent of all of the social media, honestly, you don't need to pay anybody but yourself to do the social media and get the word out of what you're doing. So that our big mistake was spending way too much money on advertising. We even did like some website on like our local newspaper, an ad on there. Again, for a little cube digital ad, it was like $500 a month.
Wow.
And it was just like on a banner while people were reading our articles. And I go on that local website and I don't even pay attention to the ads on the page, right? I'm just looking at the content, not the ads on the side. But you feel compelled as a new business, right? You just want to get the word out that you are that you want to do everything. But my advice is to really think about what makes the most sense for your area and your demographic, especially if you are in a city. Get on social media, get on, Instagram, get on LinkedIn, get on all of those. Google ads are so wonderful. Facebook ads are super cheap and that you have big bang for your buck there. So really look at your demographic and what would work best, because what I can tell you is print ads are definitely not it.
Okay, we'll make sure we get the message out. Yeah. And looking back, you've been open and up and running for about 8 years. 8 years now,
yeah.
If my early morning math is correct. If you could go back and talk to yourselves 8 years ago when you're just getting started, and think about this as lessons learned for the listeners here, like what advice would you give yourself going back, knowing what you know now and learning what you've learned now?
That's an excellent question. I think just stick with it and, just stay true to the vision and the goals that we set. And I think really take that time away from being an optometrist in your practice to focus on being a business owner. I think that it was very daunting at the beginning for Dr. Zilnicki and I to put on all these hats and with many things that we had no experience in. And we are very much in the mindset, if we are not an expert in a field, let's delegate, let's learn from somebody who is. And one area that we delegated a lot at the beginning was some of our accounting and bookkeeping, because it was something that neither of us really had experience doing. We had to hire an accountant for the practice anyway. It made sense to use their bookkeeping services, right? But it took us a little while to kind of see the bigger picture that as someone else was doing our bookkeeping and reconciling our books, we were getting really delayed financial information. So we were finding out on our end when we were being sent P&Ls sometimes 2 months later what a day-to-day picture had looked like 2 months ago. And so it took us maybe a little bit longer to realize some of those financial mistakes, like payroll, like print ads, like Dr. Zilnicki said, because we were sitting down and kind of figuring out, okay, where is all this money going out? What can we chop down on? But we were getting this delayed picture that we were then assessing. So I think that was one of the biggest things that looking back, I think we both kind of wish we had tackled that a little bit more at the very beginning. Because what we ultimately decided to do was Dr. Zilnicki took over all of our bookkeeping, having an interest in accounting herself. It kind of fit. So now we have a really great, essentially day-to-day picture of what's going on, exactly what's going out and what's coming in. And that really enables us to make those bigger financial decisions quicker and save that money a little bit faster.
How about you, Dr. Z? What advice would you give to yourselves going back 8 years?
To ourselves would just be trust yourself. We had such a clear-cut picture of what we wanted, and in the beginning you can and there's always trials and tribulations, and you doubt yourself. We've had a bunch. We had issue with billing when we delegated it out, that we weren't paying close enough attention and things were getting missed. We went through a period of time when we had babies back to back with each other, right? That was my fault. But got pregnant when I didn't think I could. But that was really hard on the office, right? And on both of us as women in business, that's hard, because you want to you have that pull of your maternal pull, but then also your professional pull. And then we had the pandemic, and we were really challenged by that in figuring out how to get through that together. And here we are 7 years later, and finding and realizing that our idea of what we pictured for our office and finding the right partner, you can get through anything and you could be successful. Patience, know when you are providing a good service and you're sincere. And when you communicate with your partner and you trust your partner, you could get through anything. So my advice to anybody starting out is trust the process. No success is ever a clear, straight path of trajectory, right? There's always those up and downs, but as long as you know where you're headed and you're with somebody that you trust, you'll get there. And that's where success happens.
I love that advice from both of you. And I'm fascinated by the business you're building. And one of the things I've recently heard from ODs that are also cold start consultants, in that they talk about, yes, there's more and more competition out there in terms of corporate optometry, big box retail, whatever that may be. And it sounds like in your area, you've seen plenty of competition. And for many people, that would keep them from opening practices. And their thought was that it's actually, despite that competition, it's never been a better time to cold start a practice. One of the reasons was that competition is predictable. I mean, you look at these corporate optometry offices, you know what their business model is, you know what their branding is like, you know what frames they have for people that have opticals. And it's a lot easier to stand out when you know that. And you've done that in an incredible way by really specializing and niching down into vision therapy and rehab, knowing what you're excellent at, and being okay with letting another optometrist do the other work, do the optical work. I mean, you're okay with letting that revenue go to someone else because you are sticking with your specialty. And I love that. And it sounds like it's really benefited both of you and given you clarity in how you've built your business. I think one of the rules you even gave yourself was like, you didn't want to work on Saturdays. Like you were so clear about everything and how that informed all these other decisions. So I think it's fascinating. I think there's lessons learned here for anyone that's either interested in cold starting or have open doors and are wondering what to do next. Any final thoughts here as we sort of wrap up around lessons learned while you've cold started, or just how to evaluate the health of your practice as it's growing? Any final thoughts here for the listeners?
I think just to follow up with what you just hit on, for anyone listening, the beauty of optometry is there are so many branches within optometry and so many specialties. So even if you're in an area where there are a plethora of providers, find that niche that's not being provided and go for it if you're interested in opening a practice, because you can really just bring a service that's not being brought to the area, do that one thing really, really well, and the patients will follow through. I've been talking to one of my classmates who's kind of branching off right now and opening her own vision therapy practice. And it can be a little daunting. She's been coming to me for some advice after having an experience of trying to also build up vision therapy within an existing practice. And I said to her, in some ways, it's so much easier to start it on your own because you can set everything into place exactly the way you want it from the beginning, in terms of insurances, your patient population, how you want to bring patients in, how you want to set up your schedule. So if it's something that you've been thinking about, just go for it, because you can really build the practice and the life that you want from the very beginning.
And I'm just going to second that. Optometry really does afford you the ability to, like Dr. L said, build the life that you want. And your practice can fuel the life that you want. And if you say you like corporate optometry, but also have an interest in low vision, you can have a low vision practice 2 days a week. There are no rules. There are no life rules. That's the thing, is that if you can find the balance that you want. You don't, just because you own your own practice doesn't mean you have to be there 5 days a week, 9 to 5. You can work Tuesday and Thursday, 10 to 2. Patients come when you're providing the service that they're searching for, and you do it at a high level, they'll come. And that's really the take-home message. If you believe in yourself, patients will believe in you, and there's no reason why you can't be successful. So just go for it. Just jump in. And my mentor always told me that you can't have faith and fear at the same time. So you have to choose faith that you can do it and that you'll be successful, because if you're held back by fear, it'll never work.
I love that. And where can your peers get to know you, follow you, get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
I can, so I'll do that. So there's lots of places. On Instagram is probably the best place. Our office is at Twin Forks Optometry. Our podcast is at Vision is More Than 2020. We do host that weekly podcast. You can find it on any place that you stream podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And our office is Twin Forks Optometry, located on the eastern end of Long Island. And both Jess and I are always happy to connect with people, to talk with doctors that may be interested in starting cold. And you could always just find us both those ways, or find us through email as well.
Awesome. Well, I will put all the information in the show notes and everything we mentioned today in this interview. And I really appreciate both of your time this morning. It was a great interview, and there's so much more we could have pulled out of that and filled up the rest of our day with. But appreciate both of your time coming on. And with that, I'll say thank you so much for listening to the listeners, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Evon's website at optometrywealth.com. Evon Mindren is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Evon and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.